welcome to our lecture today, a new lecture on Japan as a security actor, international actor. And for this session, we will focus especially on the partnership, the relations between Japan and NATO. And this is not so well known, actually. I think it's quite a precise topic. But if you look actually at what's going on, and actually what's going on during the mandate of the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, you can see that the relations between Japan and NATO have grown tremendously. So now, as you know, NATO is reviewing its strategy for the decades to come. You have these ongoing reflections going on. And I think in this perspective, especially because so NATO is looking more and more at Asia's developments, what China is doing, not only in the Indo-Pacific, but also outside of the region. Because of all that, it is very interesting, very significant to look at, the partnership between Japan and NATO. Its motivation, the objective, what is already ongoing in the relation, and what we can expect for the future development. Today I'm very, very happy to have two excellent speakers with us to look at that, to decipher the Japan-NATO partnership. Especially we have Michito Tsuruoka, which is the great expert on Japan-NATO, Japan-EU security relations. He is associate professor at Keio University, and he will deliver the main lecture for this session. Additionally, we have Mrs. Caroline Cliff from the NATO, so she will deliver a practitioner perspective. So it's really complementary vision. So we are very happy to have her, and she's in charge of the global partnership. So she is really the person to talk to at the political affairs and security policy division at NATO, and she will provide a comment right after Professor Tsuruoka's lecture. Professor Tsuruoka will talk for about 45 minutes, and then comments will be for 15 minutes or so, and then I will open the floor for the Q&A. So please, you can start thinking about any question that you might have on this Japan-NATO relations, and please type your question in the Q&A box of your Zoom windows, and I will gather the question and I will address them directly to the speaker. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Michito Tsuruoka for his lecture on Japan-NATO. Very much looking forward to it. Michito, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. I very much look forward to this and talking to you this morning in Europe and this evening in Japan. The Japan-NATO relations and Japan-NATO cooperation is a topic that I've been working on for now more than 15 years. So from the very beginning, I was in Brussels at the Japanese embassy dealing with NATO. I was there from 2005 to 2008. So it coincided with the very beginning of substantial NATO-Japan cooperation. So I still remember that the foreign minister Aso came to NATO for the first time as Japanese foreign minister, and he addressed to the NAC, the North Atlantic Council, for the first time as a Japanese minister. And then half a year later, Prime Minister Abe visit NATO for the first time as a Japanese prime minister. It was in January 2007. So I was there, and I was helping this relationship. And since then, I keep working on NATO-Japan relations. So now I'm from a researcher's perspective, I'm still very much interested in this relationship. And this is a relationship which has been changing a lot, and it has evolved a lot, and it has developed quite a lot. So I still remember that when I arrived in Brussels at the Japanese embassy, my predecessor said to me that you don't need to worry about this. You don't have many things to do. So it's just your job is just to make some appointments whenever there are visitors from Tokyo, but it's just a few times a year, and that's it. That was what I was told by my predecessor. But in the end, my life was quite different from what I heard from my predecessor. So it was a super interesting and super quite busy actually, and 3 years I very much enjoyed it. Okay, and that sort of passion still continues. And this is a outline that I'm going to talk about today. So starting with a growing connectivity, that's an overall sort of a context within which you can find NATO-Japan relations. So it is about connectivity between the two regions, Asia and Europe, and also the evolution of Japan's security and defense posture. And this has made Japan's cooperation with NATO possible. But at the same time, and vice versa as well, the NATO itself has also changed quite a lot, and that made NATO's cooperation with Japan possible as well. And then and finally, I'm going to look at the more details and the substance of a NATO-Japan cooperation today. Starting with the connectivity between the two regions, Asia and Europe. One of the things that I always emphasize is that the security landscape in Europe has become very much like Asia. So which means that the two regions face similar set of challenges, security challenges, threats and challenges. And one is a change of status quo by force. And so Europeans are quite familiar what's been taking place in vis-a-vis Russia and in Ukraine, and also the Asians are quite familiar with what's been taking place in South China Sea, or attempt to change the status quo by force or coercion in the East China Sea as well. So there are a lot of things taking place, and hybrid warfare and gray zone contingencies, and this is I'm quite sure that something that the Europeans are quite familiar with now, and Asians also they have been talking about this for some time. And A2AD, the anti-access area denial, this is about preventing your adversaries from getting involved in regional conflicts. So in the context of, for example, between the US and China, we say that the China's efforts is to improve A2AD capability, so that the Chinese could prevent Americans from intervening. So this is essentially about anti-ship missiles, anti-air missiles, and air defense missiles. So these capabilities make adversaries make things more difficult for adversaries to come in to the theater. And also the nuclear dynamics is also something that we have to think about. In Asia, we've been very much talking about North Korean nuclear issues, and in Europe, of course, and particularly since the Ukraine crisis, that Russians have been quite vocal in in talking about nuclear issues as a way to intimidate or coerce other countries. So these are just a few examples of common agendas that Asians and Europeans have. So what this shows is that the growing connectivity between the two regions. So this is very much at the basis of our conversation about NATO Japan and Europe Japan security relations and cooperation. So what this means is that what happens in Asia affects Europe and vice versa. So it used to be that this connectivity was very much perceived of a economic connectivity. So the economic interdependence and economic connectedness. But now what we are seeing is a more and more security and political aspect of this. So what happens in Europe, what happens in Asia affects not only Europe's prosperity and economic fortune, but also the security as well. So and this is I think a consistent trend. So whether Europeans like this or not, the Europeans cannot be indifferent to Asia. That's the reality. And as far as I see that there is a growing realization about this in Europe, and so this realization has led and some countries pay more attention to Asia, and not just Asia. It's now the buzzword sort of is the Indo-Pacific. So over the past several months, we have seen a growing number of European countries coming up with a Indo-Pacific strategy or Indo-Pacific policy guidelines, and also the Indo-Pacific elements in a broader national security strategy type of document. So these are just a few examples of such documents. So France has I think the longest history of talking about the Indo-Pacific specifically. So the Indo-Pacific defense strategy and more foreign policy oriented strategy and policy as well, and also a lot of attention was paid to the fact that Germany last September published a policy guidelines on the Indo-Pacific, and also that was followed by the Dutch document, and the UK as well. In the UK's case, it was not a document specifically focused on the Indo-Pacific, but it was a broader document and called Integrated Review. That is a quite comprehensive foreign security and defense policy document, in which the Johnson government championed the idea of the tilt to the Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific tilt is something that and Britain is very much championing in the context of its a broader idea of global Britain. So the importance of which has, of course, increased after Britain left the European Union, and European Union as well. Just last month, nearly 1 month ago, the Council of Ministers adopted a sort of guideline or tasking for the making of the EU strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. So these developments show that the European countries, including the EU itself, have been very much increasing their engagement and their interest in the Indo-Pacific. So this is very much used to be very much driven by the growing importance of China to Europe, but the interesting commonalities between these documents is that Europeans are more and more talking about diversifying or rebalancing its rather China-focused approach to Asia. So the diversifying first and foremost the global supply chains. So the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic had shown us that it's really not a great idea to depend too much on China. So the diversifying the global supply chain is now one of the most important agendas, not only for Europe but also Japan and the US as well, and also the German document and also the EU document are very much talking about the importance of the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, so the regional framework. So there used to be a very China-focused approach, and it's now becoming more a comprehensive the approach and the emphasizing the importance of working together with like-minded countries, and first and foremost Japan, and also in India and Australia and ASEAN countries. So this is, I think, a quite something. If you put this in the context of 10 years or 20 years of Europe's relations with Asia. So we are very much a crossroad. And so this is, so that's why this is really a perfect timing for us to talk about this topic, including NATO, Japan. And just very, very briefly, the evolution of Japan's security and defense posture is very much a necessary foundation for us to think about the development and strengthening of NATO-Japan cooperation. So what the previous Prime Minister Abe and the current Prime Minister Suga and their governments and have been doing in terms of security and defense is first and foremost the strengthening of the alliance with the United States. So the Abe established a very good working relationship with the Trump administration. Whether Mr. Abe liked Mr. Trump as a person or not, that doesn't matter, because the United States is the only treaty ally for Japan. So whoever sits in the White House, the US president is important, and strengthening the alliance with the US is almost at the very center of Japan's security and defense policy. So the strengthening of the alliance and this agenda, of course, continues. So that was why the Japanese were quite pleased by the fact that the Prime Minister Suga visited the White House as the first foreign guest after the inauguration of the Biden administration. And domestically, the consolidation of security posture, the consolidation of and making of a new security legislation and peace and security legislation under the Abe government, and that's also about expanding the scope of the activities of self-defense forces, for example, and also that was very much helpful in terms of strengthening the alliance with the United States as well. So deepening defense and military cooperation between the two countries, and that was very much something that particularly the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Abe, was very much committed to. And reaching out to other partners. So yes, of course, the importance of the alliance with the United States, that's unquestionable. But what the Prime Minister Abe really tried to do was to reach out and going beyond the alliance with the United States. So we reached out first and foremost in the Pacific region. So the most notably Australia and India, but at the same time beyond the region. And in this context, the Europe and NATO, and of course the EU as well, were very much a part of this story. So I fully believe that the Prime Minister Abe was really serious and committed to strengthen security cooperation and strategic partnerships with individual European countries and EU and NATO. And so this, to be quite honest, I'm not still quite sure how committed the current government and the Prime Minister Suga is to this agenda, the strategic cooperation, strategic partnerships with Europe. But the structure and context, I think, is still there. So the need for Japan to work more with Europeans is still increasing. So regardless of who sits in the Prime Minister's office in Tokyo, so when it comes to political leadership from the very heart of the Prime Minister's office, that's one of the questions I'm wondering. But the structure and context continues. That's I think I'm quite sure. Now looking at NATO's partnerships, evolution of NATO's partnerships, the importance of this very much increased in the context of NATO's operations in Afghanistan. So International Security Assistance Force, ISAF. In this context, and actually the non-NATO countries or partner countries and other countries contributed not a small number of troops to the ISAF operation. Compared to the Iraq war, the ISAF, the operation in Afghanistan was more popular in Europe. So all NATO countries were on board. So they sent troops there. But there were not enough troops. And so NATO needed to invite non-NATO countries to contribute forces as well. And first and foremost, partner countries in the context of PFP, the Partnership for Peace, the European countries, and some of which were trying to get NATO membership. So it's quite easy to imagine that for those countries, they contributing troops to NATO was seen as a good way to get closer to the alliance, get closer to the membership. But beyond that, some countries outside the Euro-Atlantic region, like Australia and New Zealand, also contributed troops. And then so the role of an importance and significance and value of the non-NATO troop contributors increased. And then the NATO sort of changed the way in which it called such countries. So I still remember that when I was in Brussels and the first time I was there, at the embassy, I mean, the Japan and other countries were still called contact countries. Contact countries, the terminology contact countries doesn't mean anything, because it only means that the countries with which NATO had contact. And not more than that, nothing more than that, nothing less than that. So all the countries which have ever sent a delegation of senior officials, whoever, to NATO were so to be part of the group of contact countries. But in this operational context in Afghanistan, so the value of countries cooperating with NATO in Afghanistan increased quite a lot. So the name such as partners across the globe was sort of invented in this context. And Japan didn't send troops to Afghanistan, but still very much involved in NATO's operations in Afghanistan, and mainly not mainly, exclusively in the civilian context. But but in thinking about looking at the evolution of NATO's partnerships, the role of non-NATO troop contributors, that is of the central importance. So they're particularly pushed by Australia, because the Australia was they sent a big number of troops to Afghanistan. So the maximum, I remember that it's 1,500 Australian troops are there. And also they were operating in a very difficult part of the country. So the southern part of Afghanistan, which was much more dangerous than the northern part. So there are more casualties the Australians had to face. So it's quite natural that and such countries like Australia demanded, and quite forcibly, more involvement in NATO's policymaking process, and also more information sharing and intelligence sharing were something that the Australians demanded. And as long as that Australian troops were fighting a counterinsurgency operation in the most difficult part of Afghanistan, it was really difficult for NATO to say no to such Australian requests and demands. So they're one of the sort of formulas, the ways in which NATO accepted and established was a new concept of policy shaping. So the Australians and other troop contributors were very much invited to participate in almost all discussions until the final decision is made. So all the process of policy shaping, the Australians and other partners were there. But in terms of safeguarding the integrity of the alliance, so NATO still a sort of demanded that the NATO take decisions only by allies. So, but until that moment, before that moment, then all the options were discussed, and all the practical decisions were made. So, but just as a sort of the formality for NAC to make decision, but the policy shaping and process, I think this I love very much. I love this concept very much, and that sort of addressed Australian and concerns and complaints. And then in this context, at the time, the NATO was very much talking about the comprehensive approach. So the no development without security, and no security without development. So this the idea very much at the center of NATO discussions at that time, and that was where the opportunities for NATO-Japan cooperation was found. So this is something that I'm going to talk about later. But the given fact that NATO's partnerships are very much developed in the context of Afghanistan, in the context of operational cooperation in Afghanistan, the end of the ISAF operation, that presented a sort of challenge for NATO's partnerships. Because by that time, NATO's partnerships were very much based on operational cooperation and troop contribution from partners to NATO-led operations, most notably, of course, Afghanistan ISAF operation. So after the main phase of the Afghan operations had been over, then we sort of in a situation of searching a new purpose of partnerships. And one of the ideas was that the major operation is over. So partnerships are for training and interoperability, because the Afghan type of operation may not be the last one. So we need to be prepared for future operations, and for that purpose, we need to keep training together for the purpose of enhancing, or at least maintaining, the achieved level of interoperability. I mean, achieved in the context of Afghanistan. So because the maintaining the level of interoperability without fighting together, without operating together, is not a quite easy thing. So at the time, the people's idea is that we need to keep training together so that we can maintain at least the level of interoperability needed for future operations. But this is easy to say, but much more difficult to actually do, because the joint training between your neighbors, it's easy, but the live joint training between NATO countries and Australia, for example, it's not quite easy, particularly when it comes to armies and ground forces. It's quite difficult, and it's quite expensive, and it's difficult because it's expensive. And so this idea, it's still there. So the interoperability platform and the other frameworks are established, but as far as I understand that this is, I wouldn't say it's over, but this is a bit difficult, and more difficult than we first anticipated. And then now the more, I think, a important element of NATO's partnerships across the globe has to do with global early warning, because of the increasing connectivity that I talked about at the beginning. The NATO needs to understand what's taking place in the world, including, of course, in the Indo-Pacific region, and in the Pacific region, of course, in China and in other parts of the world. So they're talking to partners. It is quite helpful in terms for NATO to maintain its high level of awareness about what's taking place in the world. So I think this sort of a more political and foreign policy on the side of the value partnerships, I think has increased, the importance of which has increased quite a lot. And compared to live exercises between countries, geographically distant, geographically distant countries, I think there's a global early warning and type of element, I think is, I wouldn't say easy, but this is quite, I think, a practical, more realistic an approach when it comes to thinking about the direction of partnerships after operational cooperation in Afghanistan. And as for early warning and a type of aspect, the one of the most noticeable events in NATO was the NATO leaders meeting. That was actually the 70th anniversary of NATO. So it took place in London in December 2019, and for the first time ever, NATO's the summit declaration mentioned China. So this is a bit, I would say, rather bizarre paragraph for NATO, because it talks a lot about the technologies and 5G. So this is very much part of a Trumpian agenda. So at the end of this paragraph, so it says that we recognize that China's growing influence and international policies present both opportunities and challenges that we need to address together as an alliance. So I believe that yes, there are two elements here: the opportunities and challenges by the rise of China. But for NATO to address together as an alliance, this is mainly about challenges. So because the opportunities, it's not a new thing, because the many NATO countries, including actually the United States, have been taking advantage of opportunities provided by the rise of China for many years. But challenges, it's may not be new thing for some countries, but not to all. So for the first time, the NATO talks about challenges they presented by the rise of China, and then this document is also talking about the need to address these challenges together as an alliance. So this is a quite interesting development, and since then, I understand that now it has become more commonplace for NATO countries to talk about China, and not just about China, but also the regional the security challenges and environment in NATO context. So that I very much believe that there are more and more interactions between NATO and partner countries like Japan or Australia, and so this is a quite something for in the context of the evolution of NATO's partnerships. Yes, I briefly touched upon this, Prime Minister Abe's visit to NATO in January 2007. This was this marked start of civilian cooperation in and on Afghanistan. So Japan provided development assistance and development money to various PLTs and the provincial reconstruction teams across the country, and also we provided some funding for NATO Trust Fund project on Afghanistan. So as I think some of you are wondering what this a marking in this on this picture is, and so this guy sitting far behind is actually me. So I situated in the context of a broader defense and deterrence posture of Japan and the US-Japan alliance. So this US element is important, and this is also related to this the fourth element of interoperability and standardization as well, because without directly talking to NATO, Japan has been using various NATO standardization agreements, STANAGs, through the United States. So in some areas, we have been quite familiar with NATO procedures through the United States. So now the more and more people are getting more aware of the importance of this interoperability and standardization, because NATO as a body conducting operations, it's actually, I wouldn't say new, but putting the period of NATO's operations in the Western Balkans and Afghanistan in a whole history of the alliance, then it's still very and a small part of the NATO's overall history. But NATO for more than 70 years, has been doing more about interoperability between allies and the standardization, the efforts. So interoperability and standardization are very much at the heart of the alliance. And for Japan, Japan has been working with the US for many, many decades. But now we need to think more about cooperating with others as well. So in this context, I would call this element a NATO as a multilateral school for Japan. So mainly on interoperability and standardization, we still can learn a lot. And looking at IPCP, this is not quite a inspiring, interesting document. I'm very sorry to say so, but this is a sort of standard, a bureaucratic government document listing various items. And the most importantly, the cyber defense and maritime security are, I think, two of the most important agendas for NATO-Japan cooperation, and particularly cyber defense is something that Japan is very much interested in, and NATO has been in the process of strengthening its own cyber capability as well. So we have common interest in strengthening cooperation in this regard. But at the same time, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, HADR, disarmament, defense, science, technology, women, peace and security, and public diplomacy, and these are the items that are listed in the document. And also the personnel at the personnel level as well. The self-defense force has been sending a officer to NATO to work on women, peace and security, and also the NATO MARCOM, which is situated in the UK, and liaison to SHAPE. And so these are more interaction with the military and the side of NATO is also the notable new development. So the more and more contact with SHAPE and MARCOM and other elements of NATO's military organization. And the participation in CCD COE, that it's the cyber defense COE situated in Tallinn. It's not a formally part of NATO, but in the context of NATO's various programs, the COEs are located. And so NATO-Japan cooperation per se is developing and quite significant, but looking at the broader context, an important agenda that we have to think about is how we can ensure synergies between NATO-Japan cooperation on one hand and Japan's cooperation with individual European countries and Japan-EU cooperation. So how we could ensure synergies between these various elements of Europe-Japan security and defense ties is quite significant, and particularly because various elements are getting more developed. So the benefits that we could think of by ensuring synergies, I think, is increasing as well. So the Japan-EU Strategic Partnership Agreement, and so this is, I believe that was discussed in the previous session of this the series of lectures, and so I skipped this. But the individual countries and Japan's cooperation with individual European countries, that's also something that I wanted to say at least a few words. So the UK-Japan, there we are doing a 2+2 ministerial meeting, which brings together foreign defense ministers. So we do this in the framework where not only with the UK, but also with France, and for the first time virtually with Germany a few weeks ago. But between Japan and the UK, the defense equipment cooperation is also something we're doing. And now the level of interest in Japan is really high on the HMS Queen Elizabeth, the aircraft carrier deployment, carrier strike group deployment to the Indo-Pacific. That is so the carrier strike group is about to leave the UK, and we are supposed to do various and series of joint training and exercises with the carrier strike group, and also between Japan and France. Just a few days ago, we finished the first ever ground troop exercise. The left-hand side picture. This is a picture from that exercise that we finished just a few days ago. So in Kyushu Islands, we did amphibious training involving not just Japanese and French, but also American troops as well. So for the first time, the France participated in a ground training inside Japan. And also there was a maritime naval element of joint training also taking place at the same time in the East China Sea, involving not just three countries, Japan, France, and the US, but also Australian, and frigate was also participating. So these are a new developments. So and German frigate and Dutch frigate are also coming. So this is a quite interesting year, seeing a series of European military engagement in the Indo-Pacific. May not be under NATO hat, but there are, I think, various things we could think of in terms of doing more NATO-Japan training, joint training. So I think and also it's been taking place, but still very primitive scale and primitive level. But so how we could make things more serious and more substantial, that's what we are now very much thinking of. So in that context as well, if we could ensure synergies between various elements, NATO, Japan, Japan, EU, Japan with individual European countries, UK, France, first and foremost. So this is still I don't have a clear answer, but this is quite an exciting time for us to think about all these issues. So thank you very much. I'll stop here and very much look forward to comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Michito. I think it was brilliant, brilliant presentation, very comprehensive, and it really allows us to understand the various dimensions of the Japan-NATO partnership. And also, I said I presented you as an expert, but you're not only an expert, you're also a practitioner, as we saw. You're on the picture, right? when the history is is actually evolving. So that's great. Now, if I can ask Caroline Cliff to set up a camera on and provide a comment.
Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Can you hear me? All right. Everything okay?
Yeah. So yeah, Caroline, can you now give us your perspective from the NATO side and from the practitioner on this?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Céline. Thank you for the introduction. And I'd like to also thank Michito and very much endorse your comments, Céline, on the very fascinating and comprehensive presentation that Michito gave. And Michito, I think maybe we should swap places. You have a lot of expertise, and very much appreciated what you said about the relationship between Japan and NATO, how it's evolved over the years, also what some of the challenges are for the cooperation going forward. And I think you draw out very well some of the possible implications for the cooperation, and you mentioned this importance of synergies. I'll maybe mention one or two things you said, Michito, and then I will go into a little bit more what I see from a NATO perspective of the partnership with Japan. I'll give a few examples of where Japan has shared its knowledge and expertise, say a little bit about what we're doing on partnerships a little bit more generally, and then a brief look ahead to the summit, because as I think many of you will be aware, we have a summit on the 14th of June. So Michito, I like the fact you mentioned that the relationship has evolved. Very much agree with you on that. I was not surprised when you talked about the IPCP being a not very inspiring document. I'll come on to that a little bit more because there are some developments in that area. But I would definitely say that we are at NATO, we're very much looking more to have a more strategic approach with our partners, and that the relationship is becoming more dynamic and more interactive. And you know, at the beginning, I think it was, and I recall you said it perhaps in an earlier article or presentation that it started off being very demand driven, and I think that is changing. I also very much support your remark about what happens in Asia affects Europe and vice versa. That's really very spot on. I think it's a view that NATO shares. NATO has in fact been addressing that for a while, not least in its work on NATO 2030. And I don't know if all the audience are aware of NATO 2030, but this is an initiative that really started after the leaders meeting in London in 2019. And the aim was to, is to strengthen the alliance, make it fit for purpose in the years ahead. And there was a reflections group, Céline, you mentioned that at the outset, group of experts that provided an input. And allies were consulted as well, and partners. Japan contributed to the NATO 2030 exercise, gave some thoughts, and now allies are intensively discussing this initiative, and it will form part of the upcoming summit. But so this is very relevant what you said, and I'll just mention also what the Secretary General of NATO said in a recent speech, which is, although the Asia-Pacific region is geographically very far from NATO headquarters in Brussels, we are also affected by what happens there. We have close partners in the region with whom we share security interests. Our security is aligned with their security. So I think that's very much on the same page as what you said, Michito. I would just maybe say one thing that you mentioned at the beginning, that when you were talking about the policies of countries being used to be China focused, but now a more comprehensive approach. I mean, I think that's right, that it is more comprehensive, but I think essentially the China element is still very, very strong. I think that China is really what it drives and motivates the discussions on the region and shared concerns and challenges in the region. There might be some, as I go through, there might be some other points to pick up on what you said, Michito, but I just want to say a little bit now about NATO's perspective of the partnership with Japan. And to set the context, just because I don't know if the students and everyone else is aware, that NATO actually has a network of more than 40 partner countries from around the world with whom we work. So ranging from Mongolia to Colombia. I don't think many people know that we have a partner in Latin America. So we have 4 in the Asia Pacific. Obviously, we're talking today about Japan, but we have Australia, New Zealand, Republic of Korea as well. And they come to NATO to share their expertise and also to gain insight from the wider network. And at this point, I think it's important to say, because it does come up quite a bit, and the Secretary General himself says this regularly, that NATO is not seeking to be a global organization. We are a regional organization, but we're seeking to be an organization with global connections, because the challenges we face today are global ones. So, as you said, Michito, partnerships with our Asia-Pacific partners started with the operational cooperation, so largely Afghanistan, and then they evolved to more political cooperation. And then that was, work on DPRK, maritime security, Russia, China, and then more and more becoming discussions on China. And in that, we began to focus on how to do more with our like-minded partners in the region. You said, and I want to also mention again, and I agree with you, that we say Japan is the longest standing partner across the globe and is a natural partner to NATO. No, so these, there may be catchphrases, but in our view, they are rooted in reality. And in practice, we consider that in relationship with Japan, there is a sense of certainty, of confidence, and of sustainability going ahead. So together with Australia, Japan is one of NATO's most active global partners. As Michito mentioned, the partnership at the moment is through the framework for the partnership is this, what's called the IPCP, the Individual Partnership and Cooperation Program. That was approved in June 2020. It runs for 2 years. But I'll mention our thinking on partnerships more generally and the new framework in a minute. So the building blocks of the partnership are the sustained political dialogue since the 1990s. This is really instrumental in fostering mutual understanding of our ways of working, strategic culture, and respective priorities. Then in theatre cooperation, and this is interesting despite constitutional limitations. We talked a lot about Afghanistan, but there was also the Balkans in the 1990s and counter-piracy work as well. But all this means is that there's a strategic depth in the partnership. Then progressive development of concrete cooperation projects. This has been embedded in the cooperation program since 2014 and is the backbone of the partnership, and it helps identify the joint priorities. And then a clear shared strategic vision built on the intense high-level interaction, reciprocal visits, and rooting the partnership in concrete cooperation, including through the liaison arrangements such as the voluntary national contribution, in mentioning in SHAPE and Markham, and involvement in the CCD Centre of Excellence. And Michito, you've mentioned some of those things, so I won't go into more detail on that. You also talked about challenges, and I'd like to mention a few from the NATO perspective, which are more personal observations. I think for both Japan and NATO, there is a challenge to identify what is the added value of the multilateral track versus the bilateral. And you mentioned Japan has excellent bilateral relations with the US and many European countries. And we feel that the multilateral can only be sustainable if it is complementary and mutually reinforcing. And it means also that, it's important that Japan prioritizes when it looks at the engagement track with NATO. But I think when one's talking about the value of the multilateral track, and Michito, I don't think you mentioned this unless I misheard, but I think it's worth mentioning Japan's, I think if you do the abbreviation, it's the FOIP vision, or the Free and Open Indo-Pacific vision, which Japan started in 2016. And Japan is very actively promoting this vision. And that's where it's using the multilateral track. It's keen to cooperate with more countries, particularly with NATO allies, to promote it. And the way we understand it is that Japan is keen to bind partners to their viewpoint, and it's on one of their key challenges, which is the rise of China. And that's obviously, very evident when you're talking about that vision, which is free and open Indo-Pacific region. So on challenges, there are some challenges for allies, NATO allies. I think NATO allies need to think harder in terms of the links between collective defense, which is their more instinct, and the cooperative security. Japan is a very valid interlocutor to handle the global threats requiring a global response. And this shows also that the Euro-Atlantic and Asia-Pacific are interconnected. And again, you made that point, Michito, about the importance of connectivity. But I think that there are also structural limits to NATO's role in the Asia-Pacific, because we can only really have bilateral relationships. We can't have a regional involvement. There's a key difference with the European Union in terms of the scope of involvement. And I think as a result, we have a limited number of partners. So I mentioned we have 4, but we don't have, there's some key players such as, for example, Indonesia in the region. We don't have anything with ASEAN, and we have dialogue with India, but not a partnership. I said I'd mentioned a few sort of concrete examples of how Japan engages with us. Michito, you mentioned Japan. I mean, Japan is active in contributing to discussions in NATO on security challenges. They attended the foreign ministers meeting in Brussels in December last year with the other partners from the region. That was for the first time they attended a foreign ministers meeting, and I think that was a very positive development. It was a very good exchange of views with them, focusing on challenges in the region, but challenges more broadly to the international rules-based order. And a number of ideas resulted from that in areas such as arms control, cyber, emerging and destructive technologies, and resilience. They brief from time to time the North Atlantic Council, the NAC, and they attend the political committee and give the interventions at that. And we have regular high-level staff talks, and throughout the year, ongoing interaction between officials at different levels, between NATO headquarters and with the representatives based here, and also direct in Tokyo. Now, specifically on briefings, so Japan is very eager to share its expertise and knowledge, and that's very much appreciated by allies. So late last year to the North Atlantic Council, they briefed on China's hybrid activities during the COVID-19 pandemic. Earlier this year on China and arms control, non-proliferation, disarmament. In April on China's military power projection capabilities, including nuclear. Next month, they're planning one on resilience to our committee that deals with that, the Civil Emergency Planning Committee, and also one on space. And then aside from those sort of more formal briefings to committees, and they also provide a good number of papers based from the Ministry of Defense or from their intelligence side, largely on China. And this certainly helps us get a better understanding of China from a strategic perspective. And all this shows how strong the engagement is, and that it's, there's a lot of concrete aspects to it. I said at the beginning that because I was obviously struck by your reference to the IPCP, so that's the existing partnership document, not being inspiring. So you challenged me there, Michito. So basically, starting back at the end of 2019, responding to the direction from allies and comments who want to make our partnerships more strategic, more coherent, and more effective. So NATO has proposed a new framework for the development and management of and implementation of partnerships. It started, as I said, towards the end of 2019. Work continued on it last year in 2020, but it's really picked up this year. And there have been very numerous consultations with the partners, with allies, but we are now proposing to transition all partners to a new type of program, which is based on the individual country, and it will be a more tailored program. So it will bring together all aspects of NATO's cooperation with a partner into a single process, and this will be regularly updated and refined. What it will do is it will provide allies and the partner with a clear overview of the cooperation, but at the same time allowing for continued tailoring of cooperation to the unique relationship that each partner has with NATO. It will be a detailed framework. It will have strategic objectives, goals, implementation plan with activities, midterm assessment, and end of cycle assessment. Now, allies and partners are already receiving a lot of these outputs, but at the moment they're scattered through various documents. The new process will provide the same outputs as the current, but it will be in a more coherent format. And ultimately, our objective is that this approach to organizing our cooperation with the partners should result in partnerships being more coherent, more efficient and more strategic. And I think this is really what allies want. We're all very supportive of, and it also builds on what you said, Michito, too. So I'd like to just sort of maybe finish with a look ahead, because I said I've mentioned the summit coming up on the 14th of June. Again, coming back to you, Michito, I liked what you said about the growing connectivity between Asia and Europe and the implications for the Indo-Pacific region. So from the NATO's perspective, our relations with Japan and our Asia-Pacific partners are increasingly an important topic of interest. Now, I mentioned the Secretary General's vision for NATO 2030, and I think that's part of that. But there is a recognition amongst the allies of the need to work with global partners, with like-minded countries, to defend the international rules-based order, and to work together to also discuss China opportunities and challenges, as you mentioned. And the expert group on NATO 2030, this was the group of eminent people that got together to come up with recommendations. They clearly advocated for closer ties with Asia-Pacific partners. So against this background, it is very likely that the allies will agree a recommendation at the summit to update the NATO strategic concept. And I'm not sure if all the students are aware, but the last strategic concept dates back to 2010. And so a lot has changed in the last 10 years. There was no mention, of course, of China in the strategic concept of 2010. And as you said, Michito, actually, you were absolutely correct to mention that the first mention of China was in the London Leaders' Declaration 2019. So I think it is, obviously we can't predict what allies will agree, but it is expected that the summit will give a tasking to update the strategic concept, and that it is likely that there will be some language relating to the relationship with China. And there will also, can be expected that there will be language on NATO continuing to strengthen its relationships with its partners in the region, where there's strong support from allies. And then I just wanted to finish, because I want to make sure there's time for questions, and I'll just see if there's anything else I wanted to say about what Michito said. But the Secretary General, again, another remark from him, and he's very engaged in sort of discussing and wanting to enhance the relationship with partners in Asia Pacific. He said, NATO's responsibility is the security of allied territory, but we stand in solidarity with the Asia Pacific region. We want to do more with partners there, because the geography of danger has shifted and because more diverse, complex threats require deeper, wider cooperation. And I think then what does that mean? Ultimately, we're talking today about Japan and NATO relationship, but I can only see the relationship between NATO and Japan going from strength to strength, against this background. So there might be some things I've forgotten that you said, Michito, but we can come back to that in the question and answer session if necessary. And Céline, I hope I didn't go over my allotted time.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. I found it really, really useful, very precious to have your views, because you really gave us some idea of how concretely things, are going. So we can really figure out what's going on on a daily basis in the relations. And also thank you for the very updated information that you're providing regarding the strategic partnership. We have already a number of very, very good questions, so I will directly jump into the Q&A session and start by asking a first question to you, Caroline, but maybe Michito, you can also jump in. We talked a lot, of course, about the geostrategic context in Asia and how it affects also NATO as a whole, and also the growing concern regarding the rise of China and the various challenges for NATO. But Caroline, you also highlighted the limitation, the structural limitation about how the alliance can engage in the region. So one question is, how could NATO best engage with the Asia-Pacific region in a responsible way without antagonizing China? So you take that question in the way you prefer, and maybe one follow-up question is that you said that NATO and India has only a dialogue now going on. There is no full-fledged partnership. So why is that? Is that because a partnership would raise too much or create too much tensions in the region? So that would be the first set of questions for you, Caroline, and maybe one bonus question for Michito on this and related to the quadrilateral dialogue between Japan, US, India, and Australia. China call it the Asian NATO. Of course, it's not Asian NATO. It's not an alliance yet. But what is your take on that, Michito? Would you see any possibility for the Quad to evolve into a kind of Asian NATO in the future, or do you think it would be desirable or not? So I will go on and ask for another bunch of questions, because we have only 10 or so minutes left. So I'm doing my best to gather all them. So we have lots of questions from Maike Verbruggen, who is a teaching assistant for this course. And so she's very interested on this topic. And she's asking a question about the standards setting process in NATO, the STANAG, and how does it affect the Japanese weapon design. If there is any influence, do you see Japan having a kind of active voice in this process, or Japan is mostly a passive adopter regarding this kind of standard? And more generally, how much influence does the NATO have on Japan's military organizations, culture? If you look at, education, joint mission, and so on, Michito, how would you assess this influence from NATO? And would you see kind of differences from the NATO influence and the US influence on Japan? Following on Maike's questions, looking at the Japanese side, is the Japanese strategy toward the engagement with NATO more driven by the MOD, the Ministry of Defense, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? And especially Maike is wondering if you see the partnership with NATO more driven by diplomatic and strategic issues and concern, or more technological, operational consideration. And regarding maybe the technological side, we have a lot of discussions these days regarding critical technology, disruptive technology, and all the security related impact. So is it a kind of a priority for the dialogue between NATO and Japan right now? And also, what about the space cooperation? We briefly mentioned that, but do you see it as a priority? Is it going to expand in the future? So this is the first bunch of questions. You have already a lot of on your plate, and I will come back for another one if time allows. So who wants to? Caroline, you want to start?
That's fine, thanks. Yes, a lot of questions. So I think the first one was how best to engage, how NATO to engage without antagonizing China. So I think I'd say at the outset that we certainly don't want to antagonize China. And the Secretary General has been very clear in saying that we don't regard China as an adversary. And we want to continue to engage with China. And we have a lot of engagement between the NATO staff and China. Most recently, the Secretary General met the Chinese ambassador on the 16th of April. So that I want to say at the outset. But I think how can we best work with our partners? So obviously, there's a lot we can do on the political front, which we've already mentioned a lot in terms of sharing experiences, getting a better understanding, using the knowledge that the partners have in the region and having a better understanding of how they see the challenges in the region. And I don't think that is antagonistic at all. That's just a fairly a natural dynamic. The challenges these days are many global challenges that we need to work on with many countries around the world. And we want to also work with China on global challenges such as climate change, health-related issues, Afghanistan, arms control, and so forth. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done there. Probably what would be a little bit more difficult would be if, let's say, there were to be, I don't know, exercises in the region with NATO flags. Okay, that would be going in possibly, you know, in a different area. That's not something that's being talked about at all. We want to continue to do joint exercises, but a lot of these can be in the context of cyber. They can be with the allies. And actually, you know, what I would like to just meant to mention earlier, because Michito, you talked about synergies, how to work on synergies between the bilateral and the multilateral. And, you know, for example, there is Japan has a naval exercise at the moment with France and the US in the region. That is a trilateral, 3 countries coming together. It's not NATO at all, but of course NATO would look to those countries to share their experiences with NATO as a way of maximizing synergies. So I hope that answers the first question. On India, well, I think that there's a lot of interest in the dialogue with India, and the Secretary General was a key speaker at the recent Raisina dialogue that India hosts every year. Took place, I think, in April. And there's a lot of interest in sharing experiences and particularly in their position in the region. But I think when it comes to partnerships, it has to be two-way. There has to be interest on both sides. You know, the country themselves has to be interested in it, and India has had traditionally, you know, been attached to its non-aligned position. So I'm not to say that's not going to change, but I think there has to be a two-way dialogue, and something then, and the allies will have to be on the same page as well with that. So, you know, partnerships, they take time to progress, and it's not to say never, never, but for the moment, you know, we go step by step, I think, in that area. I don't know, Michito, you could reply to how much influence NATO has on Japan militarily. I mean, you know, there are contacts between Japan and NATO on the military side, mil-to-mil contacts. I don't know if the relationship if more driven by the Ministry of Defense or by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think probably equally interested for different reasons. But Michito, you might have more to say on that. And I think there was a question about, is the relationship more diplomatic or strategic, or is there also a relationship on more the operational and technical side. I think there is a lot of Japan is contributing a lot on with its technical knowledge. I mean, for example, its policy, it operates on foreign direct investment. So, the whole issue about screening. I mean, it has a very active program of screening students, for example, students from China in Japan. So, I mean, and it has a lot of knowledge on more the sort of cyber hybrid disinformation, what it's seeing in Japan on that front. So I think it's broader than just the sort of high-level talks, let's put it that way. But I think, Michito, I'll let you pick up on some of the other points.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for interesting and challenging sets of questions. And first on the issue of antagonizing China, this very much depends on how you define antagonizing, or also this is about the intention as well, because the NATO or Japan or US, no one intends to antagonize China, and we just do what we think is right. But we cannot control how Chinese would react to what we do. So we never intend to antagonize or provoke China, but there are various things we have been doing, and to some of which Chinese reactions are being quite harsh. So for example, the Japan, France, US exercise that just we finished a few days ago, we didn't say anything about China in that context, but there was a sort of a tacit strategic message to Beijing, and Beijing was very much closely following the exercise, and the Beijing's reaction was not quite good. So but we didn't intend to provoke Chinese, and it's just within the confine of what is okay to do and what is allowed to do under international law and the domestic legislation as well. So, for example, the sailing through the South China Sea as well, it's all what is allowed under the international law. But seen from China, it looks provocative, but we never intend to provoke Chinese by just sailing through the South China Sea. So we need to be very cautious about this sort of question, because it's very much about intention. So that's sort of my response to that. And Quad, I don't think it's, even in a long time, I don't think, at least in the foreseeable future, I don't think it's going to be like ASEAN NATO. And the biggest reason, there are two reasons. And one is that we need to respect India's tradition of autonomy, strategic autonomy. So now Europeans are very much talking about that, but Indians have a longer history of talking about strategic autonomy. So we need to respect that. And also taking into account the fact that India withdrew from RCEP, the Regional Free Trade Agreement. So India was not prepared to join that. So that also tells something about India's the limits of alignment with Western powers, including Japan. And also I wanted to emphasize the fact that the Quad is not just about security and defense. This is also quite important, because for the first time, the Quad leaders met virtually some time ago. And then they talked a lot about the vaccine and technology and even climate change. And we established a number of working groups within the context of Quad. So I would say that Quad is already more than just a NATO type of framework. Of course, in the security and defense, it's much below the level of NATO, but in terms of the scope of various items that we deal with in the framework, then it's much broader and more comprehensive. And very quickly on the standardization STANACs, yes, as long as we cooperate with Americans, we cannot be free from NATO STANACs. So that is why our idea is that we are more interested in engaging involved in STANAG's discussions within NATO, rather than just the taking as a given through Americans. So on this point, the Ministry of Defense people are getting more interested in. And also this is very much in the context of Japan's increasing defense equipment cooperation with various European countries, particularly the UK and France. So as long as we develop something with the UK or France, then we need to respect, of course, NATO STANAGs. So this is another reason why Japan needs to pay more attention and why Japan wants to get involved in this more and more than before. The NATO and the US, yes, they have different ways, so that is why it's quite interesting and beneficial for Japan to know more about how NATO works, because the US-Japan context, it's a 100% bilateral world, and but NATO is quite different. So when we see Americans in NATO, and their way of doing business is very different from Americans dealing with the US-Japan alliance. So the two different kinds of Americans, I would say. So it's quite interesting, and also the related to that, the Japan every year sends a student to the senior course of the NATO Defense College in Rome, and they say that those Japanese students always say that this is really new and really refreshing, because they have, many of them have experience of working with Americans in a bilateral context, but NATO Defense College, the multilateral context is really different. So of course, even if you go to American war colleges, there are many international other non-Americans, but still it's American-centered organization, and the way in which they work, it's very much American, but NATO, the truly multilateral context is quite different. So it's sort of a eye-opening for those students, and that's I think really a great point about working with NATO. And finally, on the MOD and MOFA balance, I would say that it used to be very much a foreign ministry-driven process. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was very much a foreign ministry-driven process, and it was really difficult for the foreign ministry to get MOD on board, to be quite frank. And the biggest reason for that was that the MOD was quite reluctant to work with NATO because they didn't want to send troops to Afghanistan, to be quite frank. And the foreign ministry, from my point of view, did almost everything what they can do, like a political dialogue, sending foreign minister and prime minister to NATO, and they're participating in NATO trust fund projects. These are the things that foreign ministry can do, and these are the things that we already have been doing. And now a new area and sort of frontiers for NATO-Japan cooperation are very much MOD-related business, like standardization things and armament cooperation and joint exercises and cyber as well. So I think now the balance is become leaning more toward MOD, which means that how serious and how engaged the MOD is going to determine the process and the speed of the development of NATO-Japan cooperation. Yes, and just one more thing, which is about double hatting. The exercises, the NATO-Japan exercises, as I mentioned, that primitive sort of a small scale exercises have been taking place, but when we think more of a more substantial operational, particularly naval engagement between the two sides, I think we could make use of opportunities provided by double hatting on the European side. So for example, we did a small scale the joint training with the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle just I think it was 1 or 2 months ago. And the French carrier strike group, that is a under national mission, the Clémence 2021 mission. But at the same time, it is also a NATO task force 473 as well. So it's double-hatted from the beginning. So we could, if we want to emphasize the NATO element on what we do together, then we can sell that aspect as well. So of course, it depends on how NATO decides, but there are various such double-hatting. There are various opportunities provided by double-hatting on the European side. So we could think of this more in the coming, I think, years. Thank you.
Excellent, Michito. Thanks a lot. Our time is really up now, and I think it's really shown that the discussion has been very good. Fascinating to have the two views, the two perspectives on the Japan NATO, and I think everybody now is convinced that there is much more to wait and to expect from the relations. So we are looking forward to the next summit and the next development in the relations. So I would like to thank very much our two great speakers today, Michito Tsuruoka and Caroline Cliff. And as a very short kind of an advertisement for our next lecture, please join us this Thursday for the last lecture of our series on Japan's evolving role in global and regional security. And this time we will look at multilateralism and the multilateral setting. So how Japan is engaging with the UN and what role it plays within the G7, G20 summit and much more. So stay tuned, and I hope we'll see you on Thursday. And thanks a lot again for today's very rich and fruitful discussion. Have a good day and a good evening in Japan. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.